welcome to this edition of Who Gets the China, where we are all learning how to be the best possible caregiver we can to our parents and our loved ones. And I am so excited today to have my special guest, Danielle Schulz, with us. Danielle is the Associate Director of Lifelong Learning and Accessibility at the Denver Art Museum here in Colorado, which is this amazing community asset that we're so lucky to have. And I'm really excited to dig in with you today to learn about how creativity can benefit not only our aging loved ones, but ourselves. So thanks for being here, Danielle.
Yeah, so happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, let's dig in. So you have creative aging as like the overarching department. And then within that, there's subsegments or?
So opposite. We tried to figure out what would be the name of a division within. So learning and engagement is the larger one. So if you think about, there's curatorial, there's development, there's marketing, there's learning and engagement, which is essentially education. And then we have 3 subdivisions. There's interpretive engagement, which is really working with curatorial teams to put exhibitions together. And they are the ones who really do the storytelling along with the curators about the artworks to audiences. So they create those spaces, interactive spaces that exhibitions have. They do a lot of training around tours, kind of content development. Then there's youth engagement. So it's really focused on, kids under 18, also working a lot with families, working a lot with teachers to, leverage the museum as a tool for families, schools, organizations serving youth. And then my team is really creative engagement for adults and looking at how we can make the museum more accessible for people with disabilities, because there's some overlaps with youth, but also overlaps with adults. And so lifelong learning is kind of what we have been using as talking about just kind of adult learning. I don't know why we kind of got away from adult learning, but I think because we wanted to have that subspecialty on creative aging and looking at adults. And so I think what's been interesting is that has been a way of looking at how can an art museum support the well-being of older adults. That's really how we focused on kind of well-being and how creative aging really flourished about 5 or so years ago as a big area of research for the museum, because we knew we had people 55 and over coming because a lot of our members are built up from that base. But we also knew that there was a tremendous amount of growth within Denver and in that age area. And we just weren't seeing those people come. So that's when we decided, how do we learn more about kind of this age range and how do we really think about programming? And that's how the Creative Aging Forum kind of sprouted up and where this research really took off. Again, I think this is what's going to be so interesting, and I will be so curious of what your listeners are looking for, is that this is different than saying, these are folks or places that are trying to be hubs for adult learning. It's really that creative aging is it's sequential learning where you're learning something again and again, which I'm sure in this creative writing and in this blog and the podcast, you're building up your skills and you're using them again. And that is, that's really solidifying this knowledge. And these are things that we know about youth growing up, right? It's just that we are such, sorry to drop this in 18 minutes into this, but we're a very ageist society.
Yes.
So there is this underlying assumption that when people hit 50, our brains stop developing and growing. And that we know is just complete bunk and complete BS. And thankfully, Gene Cohen in his work, he's the one who really said, no, there are still these huge developmental steps in our brains and in our bodies, and creativity is a way to really unlock those. And it's something that also, again, depending on privilege, but people are able to usually give more time to once they've been able to retire or as children, leave the roost, they can focus in on that again. But it's something that we've kind of been shooting ourselves in the foot because we haven't been thinking about adult development through creativity. And so now we're so far behind. So there's a couple of these museums that are really standing up. But then there's also Lifetime Arts as an
Okay.
organization, which is also a wonderful organization that helps provide resources. It helps provide training to artists who want to teach. It is all over the country. And so it also looks at kind of pockets of work that's where this is being done. The High Museum out in Atlanta is doing some really good work around there. And then, of course, there's the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and they have a lot of programming as well, where they've really been trying to focus. There's a lot of other ones, but also we're seeing more of this in performing arts and choirs and writing programs, and just trying to, again, connect folks with creativity versus just seeing it as something that you do when you're young, right?
Right. Because when you're a parent and you've got young kids, you're very focused, or at least
Yeah.
people who are able to are very focused on trying to get their kids access to art, training in
Yep.
our informal, like let's do art classes, let's do dance
Yep.
classes, all the things. And then
Yep.
you're right, we sort of, as we get older, I don't know what it is. We just maybe don't think about outreaching to find those things in the
Yes.
same way anymore.
And I mean, or the importance of it, right?
Right.
Of seeing it as it's just as important. Yeah, right. Why do we have that for kids? Because we also know that sports are important because of physical development. We know that going to libraries and reading is important for mental development, but we're not seeing that creativity and that creative thinking,
Hmm.
that is equally important.
Like why? Why is it
Yeah.
important that we continue to be creative as we age?
Absolutely. Yes. It's one of these things similar to, if we think about kind of holistic health. And of course, I'm not anywhere near close to being a doctor, but if we think about what creativity does, it uses our brains to problem solve in different ways. It also, and so think about just that to one thing. You have a problem, whether that is, a problem at hand, something in the future. So you are using these creative synapses, or these connections to help solve that problem. You're also, why it's important for, I think, especially older adults and all of us as we age, is that it's also tapping into the experience you have to then solve that issue. And so also thinking about why aging brains are so amazing at creativity is because we have all this experience that we can pull from and tap into, and then translate it into new ways. And we know that throughout life, people learn best when they are emotionally involved in what they're learning. Now, that could be, I'm, emotionally involved in learning about this because I myself am aging. And so I want to understand what's going to, work for me. But also, this is going to be helpful for if I'm trying to solve a problem with how do you build this camping structure. We're going camping. How do I build it? Well, I have to pull into all of my creative experiences, or not creative experiences, all of my experiences that can help me realize, okay, we need this many ropes and this type of coverage. You're using that with your creative thinking too. So if we think about what that could look like when you're needing to create a presentation, or you're needing to communicate information, you're thinking about different ways to add new things to it. It also is something that is skill building, as I mentioned. The ability for our brains to learn new things, it really doesn't end. And so how do we look at creativity? That's a new, different type of skill. And it's good for us to learn these new things, to use our bodies differently, to use our brains differently. We have a lot of experience, but it's also important to go back to being kind of the novice at something, right? And being bad at something. I always
Right.
like to use this example of where I went to a pottery class, and I'm, 40, and I went in and everyone else around me was at least 15 years younger than me. So it had pottery class much more recently than I had. And I was bad at it. And I realized this is something that it was really hard for me. And I was really trying to struggle with saying, well, why is this so difficult for me? What am I, and because I wanted to quit. And it's because as we age, we're usually better at things. You're better at driving. Usually you're better at, comprehension, but creativity, whether it's using a new medium, whether it's drawing, or it's learning to use your senses in a different way, it can be a little bit difficult, but that struggle can be good. We're doing these same types of activities that's kind of kickstarting our creative pursuits. And if we haven't done it in a while, it can be, okay, how do I think about things in new ways?
Art for art's sake and being creative is amazing, but
Right.
also we are still continuing to build new neural pathways.
Correct.
And so if we
Yes.
use
And
art as a way to do that, it's helping us continue to build skills and strengths, even in areas of our life that are not related to art.
absolutely. Thank you. That was such a yes.
No, I just want to make sure I'm playing it back right because when you
Yes.
say it, it feels of course obvious, but I don't
Right.
think we think about that.
Exactly. And we don't use that type of language because the language you use talking about neural pathways, talking about like that is so much more scientific. And I think it's been so interesting where we have really had in our society this big kind of separation, right,
Mhm.
between creativity and artistry and kind of science and health, and saying that if we really say that actually engaging in creative experiences, with whether this is you are making something, you are viewing some type of creative experience, you're still being somewhat active, that is really a key to healthy aging, just like a balanced diet, just like being with friends, just
Mhm.
like going out into nature, because it does create those, but we don't talk about things in that way. So I think because we don't use that wording, it
Right,
it feels less important, or it
right,
feels less researched. And more places are trying to develop that research to show, because they know that those types of data and numbers are what help people to really prioritize it in a
right.
way.
Because otherwise you might think, well, this could be the last thing on my list for today.
Right.
Whereas, if you're older, retired, you have more time, why don't you prioritize that fun, creative thing first?
Right.
And even
Right.
I was talking to my mom is a really creative person. She's an amazing artist, an amazing quilter, sewist. She's really
Yeah.
talented. But she was even saying to me the other day, why I've been putting off these projects and doing health appointments or other things first. Why am
Yes.
I doing that? And like,
Right.
yeah, you should be doing the thing that's fun, but what we're learning is that it's also good for your brain.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's not bad fun. It is
Right.
very good fun. And the last thing I would add to that is what creative aging also does when done well. And again, it can be tricky to find this one, but is the connection. And it is
Mm.
to really combat social isolation, which we know it's an epidemic, right? It is something that the US Surgeon General, I think it was last year, if not the year before,
Hmm.
put out saying social isolation is causing the same health, defects as smoking, as all of these just terrible things. And so creative aging is also that skill building, as I mentioned. It's that learning new skills, trying them out, but it's doing it in a social environment. So it is true that your mom could sit and say, I need to prioritize this quilting, so I need to go and do it by myself, and that's fine. But it also is a way to prioritize it, to make sure I sign up for that Tuesday evening class where we are just learning new techniques. And maybe I
Right.
already know the techniques, but I'm being around other people. I know I can learn something different from them. But also there's that kind of mentor mentee connection too, of someone who is maybe a more established artist can then share um, experiences, can share ways of making, but then also vice versa. And that's what
Right.
we're seeing a lot, can be very important, especially in intergenerational. And intergenerational is not just youth and adults, it can also
Hmm.
be adults and adults. Like you and I are probably, we're two of the generations. If we had someone else, my mother was in this conversation, that would be our intergenerational, because we'd
Yep.
have kind of these different, and we can each, I can learn from you, you can learn from me, we can learn from that. And so that into the equation, I think, is
Mm.
also a very important one, is this social connection amongst people is also what creative aging can really do and support.
It's true that we can sometimes think about, I mean, maybe going to a museum might sort of seem like a social activity on some level, but
Right.
you're also feeling and perceiving and looking at art as an individual, and maybe you're
Right.
conversing with your family or whomever
Right.
that you're there with. But so on the one hand, I guess from the way I sort of look at it, it's like there's a solo component, but then
Hmm.
there's also this group component. And kind of what I hear
Absolutely.
you saying is that anything that we do to prevent or address social isolation is important and great. And using art as a way to do that is really important.
Absolutely. And I think especially amongst different groups too. So again, your blog is really focusing on caregivers. And I think that is also something that is nuanced. So it's important to mention is that, creativity can be something that can create that connection between the caregiver. And again, I'm using words that I know are a little bit more clinical, but again, it can be between the child and the parent, can be between the neighbor, but it can also then be extremely beneficial for the caregiver and the care partner, because that also, I know, as we were just talking about before we hit record, there's more and more recognition of some of the toll that caregiving can take, and how when people are prioritizing, others instead of themselves, that can also lead to burnout in different ways. So creativity, because that came up because that was such a good mention of saying what can be done individually and then what can also be done collaboratively. And that also will, I think, depend on the person. I love finding people who are those kind of conveners, where they're the people who say, great, there's a new exhibition at this museum that's coming up. I want to bring this group of 4 to come. So where they go on their own, maybe not, but getting other people to come can really help.
I had this aha moment when you just said that, which was art is important for the caregiver, not just the receiver. And I do think, as part of my journey to uncover the challenges and the joys of being that caregiver, I mean, I am learning a lot more about how self-care is important, but could you just talk a little bit more about that for a minute? Like, how does art help me or someone like me as the caregiver?
As we were just talking about, all the things we were saying as well, of thinking about, how are you finding connection to others who are maybe in a similar experience? How are you finding ways to also articulate how you're feeling? Again, we're all are so different, but what art can do, and again, this is art and creativity with kind of the little a and little c, using writing or visuals to articulate how you're feeling. I know I can speak for myself. I'm a very internal person. I process, I think, I'm very much in my head. And I had someone ask me, how do you manifest things out of your head into the world? And that's what art does. And it doesn't have to be good. All of us have written that terrible poetry in our teens, where it's like, oh, my life is so hard. But there's something that, again, I feel like what's hard is we want to find the scientific evidence, and I'm sure there is, and hopefully some of your listeners can find this and send it. But there has to be evidence of when you bring something into creation, when you bring it from your mind, from your heart into being, that can both solidify it, of being like, okay, these are things I need to talk about, but it can also, I feel like, can lighten it and just say, here are my anxieties that are just kind of, fear. And there's something about making that mark, I think, that can really bring to it. It also is, it's using a different part of your brain. So again, thinking about how physical, sometimes getting out of your mental brain, getting into more of the physical, that can be through that actual doing of drawing, of movement, of singing. And that's something I think for caregivers, when again, we are thinking 24/7 about what appointment is coming up, what do I need to do, our own stuff, but then someone else's, it gives that reprieve of you are just in your body creating something. And when people find that balance of difficulty in what you're doing, and then also supported exploration, people find flow, right? There's this idea of flow theory, of that you were doing something and you, oh my gosh, you're sitting down to write this blog, Kirsten, and it's an hour or 2 has left. And so you're in flow. So creativity can kind of help pull people into that a little bit more, which we know is so important for those of us who also have children, like for them to be a better person, to be present for your individual too.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting just to hear you talk about it, because you bring so much more intelligence and expertise to the conversation than I have, but I really resonate with what you're saying. And I think I told you it was kind of my participation in one of the early creative aging forums where I think it might have been you and Damon were leading a conversation and really talking about this idea of being creative for being creative's sake versus feeling like you need to be an artist. Right.
Right.
And just that idea of just just start, just do it, just put. And so I was
Yeah.
thinking, okay, I feel I haven't really been a writer, but I'm creative in a lot of other ways. And I
Yep.
thought, well, why don't I just try it? And I
Yeah.
really feel what you said, which is that, oh my gosh, it makes you feel kind of lighter and freer to
Mhm.
just put it out there. And
Yeah.
nobody else may ever care or read or
Right.
see or connect, but they might. And it
Right.
might help them also. But in your own mind, it's like you've sort of, I'm an external processor, so I have to talk about
Yeah.
everything all the
Yeah.
time, which can
Yeah.
drive my family crazy, but it's the way it is. But so
Yeah.
you're right. This is another way of getting it out there
Yeah.
externally without
Absolutely.
talking your family's ear off.
Which is important too.
I
It's important too. But I think what you're picking up on is so important because you are recognizing a couple things came up. You're recognizing too that you do have to carve out time because that is the thing we hear. Nobody has time for anything, and that's true. And this is something that creativity is a muscle just like athleticism, just it's something you have to work. And for those who are writers, it really is that process of sitting down. And so there's more I've been really thinking about, and I know others have been reading about and writing about too, of this idea of also like, what are your environments that are creating the opportunity for you to sit and do this? And that could be easy, like go to an art museum. I say easy, again, depending on
Mhm.
proximity. But it could also be creating the space in your own home or just throughout the day that says, this is my moment and my time to do this. Also, what I loved, the second point you mentioned, is that you also looked close to what you do, which I think can be a great jumping off point. And so, as you said, you're in kind of marketing and communication that's already writing, but looking at it as the other side of what you do.
Mhm.
And you're right, looking for that creativity in other things that we do. That's not just drawing, painting, visual. But yes, that I agree with you. That has also stuck with me since Damon mentioned that of, um, everyone's a creative, not everyone's an artist, and that there are these direct links between creativity and artistry, but they're not mutually exclusive. And this idea that as humans, we are all creative. So think
Mhm.
about even as babies, how we understand and are learning to talk and learning to move into our space. Like we're making meaning, we are creating objects, we're doing that. And then at some point, usually I think it's around elementary school, is in either interest in art starts to fade and that making external pressures come in on us. But this idea of, you're right, creativity could be, how are you just creating a beautiful space around you? How are you adding something small that just brings that joy, that awe, that beauty into the world without it having to go all the way to the side of like the big A art? And that I
Mhm.
think is where, do we all run and exercise because we want to become marathon runners? Maybe, but I don't think all of us do that. Same thing with taking pictures. Do all of us take pictures when we go on vacation because we want to be award-winning journalists? Like, probably not. So, kind of bringing down the pressure on that
Mhm.
and giving yourself that permission, but also it is the carving out the time of saying, what is this? And this could be, again, individually, but also with a
With
care partner,
others. I'm
caregiver.
thinking back to what you started with about your own ceramics workshop
Yeah.
experience, right?
Yep.
And I
Yep.
mean, like even you, this is what you do for a
What I do.
living and you're an expert at it, but it's like you have to also be able to let yourself be free from that.
Absolutely.
Like, am I making something that's art or recognizable? Or maybe is it
Yeah.
just getting my hands in the clay that's what's so satisfying right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have to do the exact same thing. I have to make the invitation and I have to make the time. And I'm also, I'm moving and, changing. So I started out, my art practice was photography. I was a analog photography person. So I had my camera and I was out and I loved it. Um, when I went into more art education, my arts practice was there, but it definitely shrunk a little bit. And then as my career grew, my arts practice shrunk more and more. And honestly, it has been doing this work that I have kind of reignited the spark where I'm like, I need to figure out something else because I can't be the one sitting and proselytizing this and then not doing it
If
for
you're not
myself.
doing
And
it.
also recognizing my own my own, anxieties that are growing and my own issues and what I'm grappling with of my, my family situation. And so my craft has shifted. I've gone a lot into similar sewing, like your mom. I've looked at more fiber arts. I've been trying to also do just some drawing and some writing. And so also finding what works and being okay with like, oh, this isn't, I'm not sure yet. And welcoming stuff back that, you have been interested in. And I think this is what's great with, I think because of our move so much in technology, there's a resurgence of more tactile in real life practices and process. So I see more of those coming back. So I think that means that people just have to almost have that kind of antenna of like, what do I want to try and what do I want to dabble in? And finding spaces that do that. So maybe it is that ceramics is very difficult and people don't want to do it, but what are ways that they could try dabbling in something?
As an older person, and I sometimes put myself in that, what are some different ways that I can get involved? Maybe I don't have an amazing museum downtown or, or maybe I do, but I can't get there that easily.
Right. Yes.
So
and that's,
let's talk about some of these options. Like what are ways people can engage?
Absolutely. And it's such a good question. And I think that's where too, I'll try and give a variety of options. So yes, I think seeing things in real life is always, the ideal. So if folks can go to, whether it's art museums that are nearby, history museums, even, gardens. I'm noticing here in Denver, the Botanic Gardens, like they're growing their galleries. So they now have more galleries. So also looking for what's just nearby. Places have historical societies. I feel like those are, again, people are seeing arts as that avenue to do further expression. So I would encourage people to look, what are some arts and cultural organizations in their communities, in their neighborhoods? If they have arts councils, going to those websites and looking, because there might be art walks, there might be gallery walks, because I think those are also great. Again, those are all very, in person. There are, I think, a silver lining from the pandemic is that there is a move towards having more things online.
Mm-hmm.
So also, even if folks are not necessarily very close to their museums, going online, because a lot of museums have very high quality reproductions.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not your local museum, if you're in a place where it's a small museum and the closest one doesn't have a great website, looking at the heavy hitters around the country. So the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, they have the Art Institute of Chicago, they have a lot of their collection online. And what I would also encourage, this will be the scale of how much you want to do. If you want to do just a little, to you want to do a lot as a caregiver, which, as we know, we need to have all of that because options are sometimes
for sure.
Go to the website and look at pictures, and then some that are like, let's really create a curriculum. But it could be looking at if they have programming. Sometimes they have online curriculum. So there are things that they provide that museums create for schools that could absolutely be adapted very easily for adults, because again, the concepts are the same. So it could be even just sharing an image and talking about it and using some of those discussion questions, having them ready.
I love that. That's such a great idea, right? Because it might not be labeled older adult, and so we might discount it, but that doesn't matter.
Automatic.
We're just learning, and we're learning as young people, as teenagers, as adults. So that's such a great idea.
I would recommend if people do go that route, not printing out anything that says school, because that's the quickest way. Because you're totally right. You're hitting up on quality and age appropriate materials is important. So having not Crayola, but having Prismacolor colored pencils is important. But you're right. It's like the concepts are so similar of just how are we talking about? Usually it's about identity. It's the same. And I think honestly, that's what's interesting with a lot of older adults. And all of us, I think, are also grappling with some of the similar things that we did when we were maybe in high school going off to college of like, what am I doing with my life? Who am I now? What's my identity? And these are the same concepts that are being talked about in different tours. So that's one. Obviously, the in-person, being able to go, whether it's to a performance, but also more performances at theaters and ballets are having online options. Looking in areas for transportation options. Again, I know transportation, especially to downtown areas, is so tricky, but sometimes there are shuttles or there can be free, free parking if you just request. Some places have materials that can be sent out, like the Denver Art Museum, as we've talked about with our Art at Hand boxes that are designed to go out to organizations. But also looking, again, locally at what people have around them and not discounting how you can think about and talk about the elements and principles of design, of art around you. So I picked up a book over the weekend that was about like forest schools. And so it's like this idea of going out into nature, and you can look at patterns. You can talk about shapes of leaves and colors. Again, this is all very like visual arts focused. If there are art classes, trying those out. Again, looking at the library systems are just incredible because a lot of them, number one, have free passes to area museums. They also have at least the Denver Public Library, so I would assume other ones would as well. But you can request accounts through like Craftsy and other, because Craftsy is it's like a skill building online art program, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think I've looked at that for education.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
stuff.
Stuff comes up, there's tutorials. So again, it's going to depend because I think those types of tutorials can be helpful if someone knows what they want to explore. Okay, I know I want to do watercolor and I want to find this intro. Again, I see it. I think it's more important to have the in-person, but also I would recommend to people not spending a ton of money, but setting aside a budget to be able to just also purchase different art supplies. And the ones I would highly recommend are clay. And there's air dry clay, but clay is something that we have gotten feedback on. It is such a different material that people don't usually utilize, right? They know about drawing, generally know about painting, but clay, because there's usually a kiln. So finding some nice air dry clay that's like a terracotta color. There can also be something very, again, therapeutic about the tactile quality.
Like if you have, possible mobility challenges.
Yes.
And it's
easy. Flexible. And I think that's the other thing too, is you're right. It's easy and flexible, thinking about the types of things to start building the comfort with. Because there can be so much hesitation of like, I don't want to create. And so finding materials and prompts that are open-ended and there's success, right? So instead of me saying, okay, Kirsten, we're going to hang out today and we're going to make some art. I'm going to give you some clay and you're going to make me a pinch pot. Like you might be like, oh gosh, I don't know if I know how to make a pinch pot. How do we do it? If I just say, we're going to get together, we're going to play with clay, we're going to make some coils and we'll see what comes from it. Because then it's like the end result is not the pinch pot. It is, we are going to explore with clay. And then just getting people to explore, and that introduction little by little. Because I think what can also be hard is if you go 0 to 60 too quickly.
Right.
And those of us who have been in art school also know that the scariest thing can be just the white canvas or the white paper, because it's like, what do you add to it?
Totally.
So having collage is also a very
that's a great one.
Again, if you give parameters, let's look for favorite colors, or let's look for, it can be mood boards too. Like, let's look for how you're feeling today. And so using things like that to kind of help just get the conversation started. And that's, I think, where it can be the biggest benefit in kind of starting that is like, what does this help you see differently? And how does this help cultivate just that? Yeah, just thinking kind of differently.
Are there guidelines or suggestions? Say you're dealing with a parent or a loved one who maybe in their past was really creative and excelled in those areas, but maybe now for various reasons, like they have limitations, but it might feel for them like they're going back in time.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and I'm not saying you have the answer for this, but I
Yeah.
love that you've given some ways to talk about, like, let's do a mood board to talk about how you're feeling. Because you don't want
Mhm.
somebody to feel like they're in like a remedial art class, right?
Yes. Right.
How do
Yes.
we, like, what are some
Yeah. No.
prompts that you love for sort of helping with that?
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point is how do you still, and then that's what everyone will have to do individually is looking at themselves and then their parents is, yeah, what is their level
Right.
of
Right.
experience? And you might start differently because then also things, again, entry points that can help people open up who might be adverse is also having it be where maybe it's collaborative. So let's do something together. And I would love you to teach me about this. Because again, depending on where people are, but a lot of things we know as well is as people age, a lot of their autonomy goes away, choices. So that can be an avenue for storytelling. That can also be an avenue for, again, that sharing that experience. Okay, I know you created this beautiful quilt for so and so's birth. Can you tell me about the colors you chose? Because I want to think about quilt making together, and so putting it together. I mean, it could be because I think where I thought your question was going, and it didn't, was also what if folks, or what if parents had more of an arts practice earlier in their life, and then through some type of physical change, cognitive change,
Yeah.
they're unable to.
Right.
That's where it can be tricky because and this is where I would love to, come back and explore more of this because I can share what my inclination would be, but I honestly don't know if this is the right way. My inclination would be to try two different things, either to, as I mentioned before, how can it be an opportunity where someone can share, and it could be we could do something collaborative, but if it also might be wanting to introduce something creative that is almost very, very different and far from what their creative practice was. So for example, if someone was an excellent draftsman because they're, and we're able to make these amazing architectural lines, but now because of arthritis or other changes like holding a pen or something, or their writing, it's very difficult. We don't want to reintroduce that because then that's
Right.
going to just create more frustration. So I might almost say, let's do opposite and go collage or go clay or go music or do something that bringing them into, they're still like a newbie in another area, but it could still bring in some of their concepts that they were interested in exploring. Cause I think that people, we focus a lot on what we can't do, right? When things change in our bodies, especially, it's like, I can no longer run that last mile because of this. And so how do we focus on where it's not the negative and here's what you can't do? So let's find some accommodations, but it could be, and that might be it too, is having that. It'll really depend on, I think, the people. Because I think about my mom was in theater for decades, and I've tried to see about other ways that she'd be interested in community theater or doing other things, and she is like so. But also there's this, and I can share this because it's my mom. She is a snob around community theater. So there's also a level of, but what we do instead is we go see plays together and then we talk about them and we rip them apart. But that's our type of
whatever builds the connection,
I was
right?
Say, it's not probably
because of course, like if it's your area of expertise or what you've done for your career or as a passion all your life, you're going to approach it with that knowledge and that perspective. And we don't want you to give that up, right? We want you to be able to still bring that to the table and have a conversation. But maybe it's better to begin someplace else that you're not so familiar
just
with.
knowing that there's going to be all that extra weight. But I would be so fascinated to think, because I don't know, maybe that is wrong. And it's really where you have to kind of, so I don't know.
Do you have any suggestions or expertise on if my loved one does have pretty significant cognitive decline or Alzheimer's or something else?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have suggestions for how to cope with that?
Absolutely. My biggest suggestion would be looking to the Museum of Modern Art. Were really the pioneers for museum programming for folks with memory loss.
Okay.
And they have a program called Meet Me at MoMA, and they shared a ton of their curriculum.
Okay.
online. So you can go onto their website. So that's one thing to get if you want that deep dive. A couple other things is finding groups that are doing this. So sometimes libraries, they're called memory cafes. A lot of museums have these. If you're looking, usually they're like memory in the making or something, but there's a lot more programs that are doing, or I'm sorry, a lot more organizations that are doing programming for folks with memory loss. So it's kind of finding those. When you're doing things at home, instructions can be lost. So if there is an action that's required after each direction, that can make them stumble. So thinking about, instead of a string of directions, that you would have step, action, step format. So if you have, take your top off of the pen, that's your one. And then you do the next instruction. So it does feel almost like you are talking down, but it's limiting the amount of information. It's having patience, which is very tricky. And having things kind of accessible to the folks. The thing to also note is how different types of dementia can affect vision and language. So it also might be that people's vision is being affected by the dementia. So if we're asking them to draw, so again, open-ended. If we're saying draw this water bottle, I might not say this water bottle. It might just say draw a drinking vessel. And if it's a straight line, it might be fine. So also the interpretation, there is an amazing Radiolab podcast episode that I cannot remember the name, but it is about using improvisation with folks with memory loss. And so it's this idea of yes and. So again, if I'm asking you to draw me a picture and it's not exactly what it was, that's fine, because it doesn't matter. So I think breaking things down, having patience, and then thinking about, again, open-ended prompts to any type of making would be, in addition to then finding other memory cafes or spaces like that.
I mean, and I think also what I've been learning just talking to so many amazing experts is like, if you are creating a connection with another human, and if it's with your family, even better, like there's no wrong, right?
Exactly.
You're having a conversation, there's storytelling happening, there's transfer of knowledge and time together. So like we might misstep and we can say, was that fun? Was that what you wanted? Or was it not what you wanted? What would you like to do next time?
And I think you hit upon, that is the difference, I think, between, the kind of creativity and artistry is like, creativity is really seen as this tool that can help us experience exactly knowledge sharing, storytelling, community building. And so if that's the focus of, let's use, whether it is going to an art museum or looking at artwork or listening to a new music, then having that as just one part of the experience, with the other part being that connection, then you're right, there is no wrong. And honestly, I've had some of the best tours throughout my tenure at museums when people hated the work I was talking about. And that's great, because that's where I'm like, great, tell me how much you hate it.
Right, let's dig in.
What you hate about it, because then there's something there. And you're right, because then it's like, at the end, it can also just be fun and joyful and like, wow, that was a big, like we went to, again, another just funny example. We went to see at DCPA, I think it was last year, The Color Purple, because my mom does not like musicals. She likes theater, or like more theater. And I was like, great, this will be perfect. And all of a sudden it turned out it was a musical. And so we still went and we laughed about it, but that was great, because now we have this shared experience. But it's true, we then translating that into like, then what do you do after the looking to then continue the experience? Because I think that's where looking and engaging with arts is absolutely valuable. And it's like, well, what's that next step also of how it is still getting to, but it's like thinking about the outcomes. Yeah, if you're noticing, you know what, I really want to connect and be more joyful with my parent. And that's really how I am. I realize so much of what we are doing is talking about bills and medicine and this and that. And it's like, let's just have something joyful. So finding something that can be silly and fun. So we're going for high tea this weekend for her birthday, for my mom's birthday. And we're going to dress up.
Nice.
That's my creative thing. I'm like, we're going to make something.
Love it.
It's small. Is it high A artistry? Absolutely not. But it'll open up those avenues.
Right.
And yeah.
And it creates those memories too. I mean, I'm laughing. My sister and I were back visiting my mom this past couple weekends ago, and again, and my dad, I'm really through this exploration, I've really learned to do exactly what you just said, which is kind of embrace the fun and the silly and don't have everything be about healthcare. So
Yeah.
I love these yacht rock concerts. I don't know if you know what yacht rock is
I
or
know.
whatever.
My husband loves yacht rock. Oh my gosh.
So they were playing where my mom lived, and I said, "Well, let's go to the concert." And she's like, "What even is this?" And my sister was sort of like, "It's kind of cheesy, but and it was out like at a yacht club, not really, but
Yeah.
sort of had that vibe. And
Yeah.
anyway, it was great, right? Like it's not high art, maybe you might argue it's not the
But it's
symphony.
music. You are
Yes,
still supporting artists who are doing that. Like and all of that, I think you pinpointed it, where it's like there is a reason why we have places like the dam, and we have these stewards of collecting so that we can go and see and have communes with like amazing art. And there's absolutely validity in those other experiences. Like we can, like that is what brings that joy. So I think that is a perfect example to
yeah,
share, because I think when people hear creative aging, it's like, okay, so I need to sign myself up or my parent for a 6-week class. And it's like that could absolutely be it, but you have to also recognize who you are, the reality of who your parent is, and then where you kind of want to go. And I agree. That's a big learning that I have too, which is difficult. Also of like, what do I want versus what do they want? And
I
I think
know.
it's great because sometimes we have to start with what we want to just open that door to
Yeah,
then
because if we don't want to
say,
do it, we're not going to do it either.
right. And
You
then
know,
say exactly. Yeah. So it's like, what's that shared? And then if someone doesn't, and then maybe that'll open it up of like, oh, maybe they have more things here, or
right?
who knows? Yeah. Just the new
Yeah.
experience is yeah.
And probably
So
even just that dialogue of what are some fun things you might want to do? Would you be
yeah.
interested in this? Okay, no, fine. What would you be interested in? I mean, even opening those doors is really great and
Yes,
valuable.
the amount of information we have, it's like, well, how do you find out where all these things are? We are more savvy, so we know where to find out things. And especially if parents have moved to different towns or not, connected, then having those variety of things. But yeah, really that are just fun, experiential, playful. I think, yeah, when people can get sometimes it can also be easier to have that third party. So whether it is a neighbor or something that can also
Yes.
kind of get that, like, let's do this together. It's in a group versus individual, which can,
I mean, I love that you're saying that. And again, it's interesting. There are just these themes that continue to evolve, and that's one of them is about sometimes the parent-child dynamic can
yep,
be different. And
yep,
so, like for instance, we were talking about decluttering things or saying things that you need to have honest conversations with your parents. Well, sometimes it could be the teenage grandchild that could be
yeah,
like, they just put it out there because they're not inhibited to make a funny comment
exactly.
or say something. But so,
Right.
like that same idea of bringing in a third party that maybe just shifts the dynamic and makes something that might have felt awkward feel
Yep,
more natural. I
absolutely.
love that. And that multi-generational thing that's
Yeah,
really important to me.
you're hitting it on the head. Yeah, there's a lot that is between the parent and the child, and so finding these excess and outside, and I think also finding as much as possible, whether it's overt or subtle, opportunities to shine light on older adults who are doing this work too. So trying to find yacht rockers that are older, find artists that are older, because I think that's also
Yeah.
this, like, you are not done because you are,
Right.
over the age of 65. Like there's
Yeah.
so many more things.
Like the Alma Thomas exhibit that the dam hosted,
Yes.
that was kind of that I had seen and
Yeah.
then got to see again with you and your description of it and talking about how much older she was when she was really able to begin her professional creative journey. I mean,
Yeah.
that's so inspiring even to me in my 50s to be like,
Yeah.
well, look at this incredible artist. I mean,
Totally.
wow, she
Totally.
started, I can't remember, in her 70s, maybe really
Yeah.
actually
I
putting
mean,
stuff
that
out
was,
there.
yeah. Yep,
So,
she really was. And it was when she was able to retire and had time to dedicate
right.
to it. And she also, I think, yeah, it's like, what are then the stories and the learnings through those characters that we're hoping that will seep in? Because it's also her perseverance. Because I think that's also something that is, we're just seeing with people who have arts practices. And then again, because of age, something is changing, is it's like, this is the one way I used to be able to create. And if I can't do it that way, I'm not going to. That stubbornness where she was able to say, my arthritis is so bad. I'm in so much pain, but I need to make. So how do I find something to jimmy rig it so that I
Right.
can just still do it? And it's like that acknowledgement that it's celebration of that my artwork needed to change based on me versus the opposite of seeing things as we can still do this and we can still change it to what we need it to be. I hope is then just reiterating the idea that, creativity is within us all. We just have to find the way that it works best for us to do it at different points in our life. So
That was so beautifully said. I love it. That was you just summed it up so elegantly. I love that. And I
Yeah.
feel like I could go on. I have so many
I
other
know.
topics
I'm
I want to
sorry.
talk about and I want to get into, but I know that we've been talking for almost an hour.
I know.
And I feel like I'm going to end on that note because I love that. It is within us at any age, and it's just a
Yep.
matter of kind of how we tap into it and find
Mhm.
ways to do things that maybe we didn't think possible.
Well, this is
This has
great.
been so fun. Thank you so much for
Oh, you
taking
are
time
so
out of your
welcome.
very busy schedule
Oh my
to
goodness.
educate me and my listeners and my readers about things that we can do to be better caregivers and also
No,
better to ourselves through
yeah.
creativity. So,
I mean, well, and also, like I said, this is doubly impactful for me because I'm also, it's helpful to think about, okay, do I have knowledge and information for folks at this point? Because I'm also a very newish caregiver myself. So it's
yeah.
very helpful for me and I'm very glad. So thank
Well,
you
I
so
love
much
it.
for
I
being
think we're all on a caregiving journey,
I mean,
just
we are.
depending where we are on it, right? And
Exactly.
so it's nice to, I
Exactly.
feel like for me, a big part of doing this project is learning from other people and
Yeah.
sharing with each other so that we can all be better. So
Yeah.
awesome.
Great.
I love it. That was really
Yay.
fun. I hope it was
This was so
fun
good.
and not too
It
scary.
was great. No,
Okay.
as you can tell, I love talking about this stuff.
I know. I love it too. That's why it's
It's
been such a
great.
fun journey, really.
Yeah,
So.
it is.
Who Gets the China is written and hosted by Kirsten Mau, produced by Aaron Bryce of Blue Ogden Productions. Our theme music is composed by Greg Fellman of Wind Sand Productions. Our cover art is by Jen Beam of Gigawatt Studio. For more stories and expert advice, follow along on Substack or at www.whogetsthechina.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who might appreciate the conversation. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.